Hi, folks. So I have an idea and I have a theory that I've been working on all night, and um, I just wanted to put it out there. And I can't write it down because I don't write. I can't explain it. I use diagrams and voice rather, and um, it's contrary to a lot of the I think the mainstream science or theories or data. So the mainstream, or where we're headed at the moment, is we've got a new variant, and the new variant is a lot more contagious. And I'm not disputing any of that. It being more contagious, it can possibly bind to the ACE2 receptors, which allows for more infections. That's standard. And the current theory is that that's driving these new spikes, these waves. But I watched a chat yesterday because I'm of the firm belief that the majority of our excess deaths now are related to lockdowns. Uh, and I watched a chat yesterday by Professor Denny Rankor, and I'll put the link below. And it's a 10-minute clip, very interesting. And he pointed out a few things. And from these things, my mind just started running, and I spent most of last night just digging and playing with data and things like that. So, I'm gonna just use my silly little board again. But basically, what Denny explained is in human history, from year to year to year to year to year, we'll have summer, winter deaths, summer, winter deaths, summer, winter deaths, summer, winter deaths, and it goes on like this. So it's very cyclical. Human nature and or let's say science and nature, it's very cyclical. So in all cause mortalities, and this is a very rough explanation. Just I'm not a scientist, guys. So what we had is, let's say when they had the spike in Italy and things like that, is instead of having our normal death, there was a massive peak there. And what he basically explained, Denny, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, is that all non-cause or all excess mortality, so anything that pops up like that, usually is something that's different that's happened in the environment or in the world. Something different was at play. So what happened here could be that suddenly, let's say in Italy and everything, we had, and this is one of the examples, all the old people and everything were pushed into old age homes. Everyone was isolated and locked up, and what happened is they were taking their support away. That they didn't get to see people, and everyone was in this non-ventilated room with this virus. So obviously everyone became infected, and basically that caused massive spikes because these spikes didn't happen everywhere; they happened in particular places. So therefore, it couldn't have been a global thing; it had to be specific to that area. He also mentioned that in history, there was in France, I think it was. He said there was a massive death rate the one summer from a heat wave, and then we would have had the usual thing, but the mortality would have spiked because a lot of old people died from that death wave. I mean, from that heat wave. So the way I interpret is that as you go, we'll have pretty much your excess mortality, your death rates from year to year to year. So they should remain fairly standard unless something externally interacts with the people or the environment. So let's say we have a disease outbreak, or there's a global war or a famine or something like that. So then I was looking at South Africa's, and our death rate went like that, and then now it's doing that. So that's winter. So when I looked at our death rates, and to me, there was no massive spike. It was gradual up and down, attributable. We had between 20 and 30,000 deaths in winter, and it's not unusual for South Africa to have that death rate in winter. So to me, it was a mild sick season. I'm not being callous here. People do die, but mild sick season. And then suddenly in December and January, we hit this here. Now, this is out of the ordinary for us because in our sickness is supposed to be seasonal, goes up and then comes down and goes up. But that there is completely out of the ordinary. Now, I had an idea. What if, let's say, that's baseline, and we could put 10 here, and it doesn't matter what the numbers are here, because I'll call it baseline health. And the moment a person drops under baseline health, Mr. Virus has a better opportunity in taking not taking hold because everyone gets infected, but it has a better chance of killing you, of making you horribly sick because that's your baseline, your threshold for your immunity. And then what happened is that Mr. Virus here, everybody in a specific segment. So it was all those high risks, the people with the diabetes and the hypertension and the very old and all those. So we've got a specific category here that seems to be affected by the virus, and it's very marked because everyone under 55 or something, there's hardly any, and then above that, as you go up and the comorbidities, the death rate just soars. So let's say that in terms of the morbidities, if you are here, this SARS-CoV-2, it hammers you. That's your base rate. So in April, May, June, when winter came, we had all the people who were sitting in this area here below got horribly ill. Most of them died. Then the people who got through, we might have had a couple of people sitting over here. So they were +1, +2, +3. And then as we moved forward here in the lockdown, and as they were exposed to more stress, more strains, more fear, all the hardships of lockdown, lack of social contact, being locked inside because we were told to stay inside, which poorer ventilation, more exposure to a virus. So all these factors count against us. And then as we move in time like that, these people here, they start dropping below that threshold. And the moment that you drop below that threshold there, this virus, which is highly contagious and it's floating around and it will always be floating around, that can jump in and you're more susceptible because your immune system's dropped below that threshold. And then as we move, we've got people who might be here with an 8, and then we move down the road here, and let's say 18 months down, and with all the stresses and strains and everything associated with lockdown, and I'll throw a few ideas around about that now, as time moves on, people across the globe, they start dropping below that threshold because they're taking a pounding from the lockdown and from everything associated with the lockdown. So you're moving down, and then as they drop below that threshold, they're more susceptible to the virus, the immune systems collapse, and corona takes hold. Whereas if there was no lockdown and there wasn't all this associated trauma with this, and we just carried on normally, these people here might be sitting in their Goldilocks zone up here where they normally would have been every year, and then they would have been exposed to the virus as usual. Everyone would get infected with the virus, but your immune system, everything will fight it off because it isn't the deadliest thing on earth. But with associated lockdowns and stresses and media hype, we just keep on dropping down below that threshold because it's just dragging people down. So I thought about that because there's a lot of research that I've been through or read through the years with trauma and PTSD and suffering. So one book that came to mind immediately was Viktor Frankl wrote when he was in the concentration camps. And he spoke specifically of there were massive deaths associated after specific dates. So a lot of people after Christmas, after New Year's, or after their birthday suddenly passed away. And he put this down to humans basically giving up the mental fight. And we must remember that our mental well-being, our emotions are directly connected to our physiological beings. So these people hung on and hung on and hung on in the concentration camps, and then they said, we're going to see our family at Christmas, we're going to see our family at Christmas or a birthday, whatever. And as that passed, they went like shit, and they sort of gave up the will to live. And then as they gave up, their systems collapsed, their immune systems collapsed, they were more susceptible to disease, illness. And a lot of people just died after that. He says there were just waves of people dying after these specific dates. There's a chap called Gabo Mate who talks about this connection as well. There's lots of literature. And a chap, Bessel van der Kolk, he's got a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And he also associates trauma or mental anguish, for lack of a better word, with physiological things. So a lot of the people who don't deal with traumas, who have severe impacts on their mental or emotional state, end up getting cancers, end up getting this, and that makes a lot of sense. 2 years ago, I went through a really, really rough patch, and shortly after that rough patch, I got horribly ill, and it was the H1N1. It was that virus, and I was down for weeks and weeks on end. And whereas normally I'd walk through a winter season without feeling any illness because of the associated mental trauma and emotional fatigue or whatever you had before it, the moment I'd recovered from the illness, I mean, from the mental problem, and I'd gathered my strength. My body was so tired from everything that the first bug that came along, boom, it put me down again. So are we not sitting now with a nation who've basically had the shit frightened out of them? Because in March, April, when this thing came out, from all the reports we received, it was the bloody end of the world. So it was traumatic. Uh, Most people don't have access to off-stream media. They just hear the same narrative being pumped out by government and by big business, whoever you want to call it. And it's just bad news, bad news, bad news. Now we couple this with lockdowns where people are locked away, people aren't seeing their family, people aren't out in the sunshine, people aren't running around, people aren't doing things that used to make them happy. People have had their booze taken away, they've had their smokes taken away, they've had their jobs taken away, the industry is collapsing, our unemployment rate's gone through the roof, walking around in fear. We've got these masks now. A lot of the cases that I saw now are deaths from pneumonia. So are these bacterial pneumonias? Because we must remember also, Fauci himself wrote and said that in the Spanish flu, the second wave was predominantly caused by bacterial pneumonias caused by wearing masks. But I'll get into the mask thing another day because there's more than enough literature now for us to throw masks away. But are we not seeing this constant thing or this constant wave after wave being driven by possible lockdowns? There must be an association between the two, in my opinion, because if you take any animal as well, and you can take a healthy animal and you can lock it up in a cage and you can subject it to trauma and stress and pressure. And as time goes on, its immune system, everything plummets and it will be susceptible to illness and it will wither away. And we've seen this with people in old age homes as well. When people get put in old age homes, sometimes where they don't see the family anymore, they're just left there basically to die. And they do die. Their condition deteriorates rapidly the moment they're pulled out of a social circle. Remember, humans, we mammals. We're meant to be together. We're meant to live in big herds. We're supposed to be together. Now, if you separate a human like that, their cognitive function and their mental capacities, everything just decline rapidly. And then with that, so does the health. So are we looking at a point here where the longer lockdowns go, like with the diagram, the longer lockdowns go, the more we're going to have people moving from the healthy threshold to below that there. So we're in Goldilocks zone, and with more stress and everything, we're dropping down. Businesses are closing. There's lockdown. There's more curfews. There's more bad news. There's more of these bloody family meetings, which are just trauma events. Cyril, you're acting like the abusive stepfather with these family meetings, mate. You're just traumatizing the people, and we're dropping under that. So that's my theory on these second wave, third wave, and all these excess deaths. Is yes, the virus is more transmittable. But if everyone managed to survive the virus, because no one's come out and said it's more deadly yet, it's just more transmittable. And mostly viruses move from being deadly to less deadly, but more infectious, because that's the viruses survive. So if all these people here survived the first wave, surely their immune systems are now primed and should be primed for any other mutation that comes along. So if I got COVID in winter and then 3 weeks ago I lost my sense of taste for a day or two and possibly the variant came along, that would have been another exposure there. And the re-exposure could, they haven't ruled it out. They actually have said that the new variant can infect. But once you've got that in your immune cells, your T cells and everything, you should be able to fight it off. But you won't fight it off if we've dropped below that threshold. So healthy person in 2020 fights off the virus. 2021 sitting above threshold. 2022, shit, we're below the threshold from all the pressures and everything in the lockdown. Now the virus can take us. So is this virus being driven by lockdowns? Are our government missing something here? Is the World Health Authority and everyone missing something here by imposing these lockdowns and regulations that have never been used at mankind before? They've only popped up now that China put them in place. Before, the World Health Authority never would condone this. And there are a lot of doctors and scientists speaking out against this. So I wanted just to throw this in the mix, and maybe people can start analyzing data and looking at this as well. Maybe we can get a lot of psychologists and people involved in these equations as well, because as much as scientists look at things and much as analysts look at things, we also need to look at the human nature as well. We aren't taking that into account. We are sentient, caring, loving beings, and the moment that is put under pressure, we do crumble. And the moment we crumble, we are more susceptible to illness. So, how's that for a thought? Maybe government should say we need to remove all these lockdown now and just work on targeted approach and harass people to be separated, and let's get back to normal as quickly as we can, because previously we had our peaks and troughs and we were in a natural cycle. The only thing that's changed in this new world is the lockdowns and the mass media and the fear. That's the only impact, or the only thing that's sadly been forced upon humanity, and sadly humanity is experiencing a peak. Whereas if we didn't have it, like many people have said, would you have even noticed that we've had this new virus and variant going around? Because every year we have hospitals overflowing all over the world. It happens. But if it wasn't for advertising budget, media, and government intervention, we might not even known about it. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't even known about it, because when swine flu came around, when the first SARS came around, when MERS came around, all these things like that, and some of them were more contagious, more deadly than this. We just heard about them in the back of our minds and just carried on. The only thing that's changed is lockdowns, government interventions, and fear. If we remove that, could our immune systems all recover nicely? Could people on the threshold get better and become stronger and more resilient? Again, if you've been exposed to the virus, scientists, your input here. Once I've been exposed once and got over it, I should have sufficient immune response, unless that virus has mutated so much that it's become extremely deadly. But that isn't the case here. We've got the same sort of guy moving along and exposed and now suddenly sick. It's just a thought. I just wanted everyone to ponder that, because that might help solve a lot of solutions, and maybe we can get this lockdown out, because I do believe it is driving more damage than good. But let's think about this. It's interactive. I could be right. I could be wrong. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist or professor. But let's just think about this. Ask questions, guys. Ciao.